When you start a company, you might be in it for 10 years or longer. And then we look for something that's special, right? And that something is hopefully the team. And actually, we will only work with a team that we think is special, but also an insight. So very often, because one of the things that we like is bringing new technology to old industries.
All right, this is another episode of the Form Your Own Pack podcast with Founders Pack. My guest today is David Waxman from 10110 Ventures. David, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me. This is great.
All right, so for people that don't know, who is David and what is 10110?
So I am a serial entrepreneur turned investor. I did 3 venture-backed companies over the course of nearly 18 years. And then about a decade ago started, which makes me feel very old, started one of LA's earlier seed funds called 10110 Ventures. And we, at the time, saw an incredible opportunity in Southern California, particularly for things that are, you might not think of Southern California for. So, people often think of SoCal as being media and entertainment and Hollywood. And it's also the first largest port in the country with the Port of Los Angeles, and the second largest port in the country with the Port of Long Beach, and a huge aerospace industry and lots of other things going on here. So that's how we got started. Yeah.
And that it's true. It is the Port of Los Angeles is the largest port, I think, in the US, isn't it?
In the US, yeah.
Yeah.
First and second. Port of Los Angeles and Port of Long Beach are the first and second.
Oh, those are two different things. I always forget that. They are two different things. Interesting.
Yeah.
We had a friend that actually was at the Port of Los Angeles, I think. Was he Long Beach? I think it was Long Beach. I always get them confused. So that's an interesting fact. So then after starting your companies, and what sort of companies did you start that were venture backed?
So had a company that was doing a recommendation system. That was the first company I did. It was bought by Microsoft, and then had a company that was making it easier for people to get online, which was called PeoplePC, and that went public. And then sold to a company called Earthlink, which was an internet service provider back when those things existed. And my third company was in advertising and helping small businesses get on television, actually.
Oh, interesting. I totally remember PeoplePC, by the way.
Oh, awesome.
Does that make me old? Might be. I
Maybe.
do remember that. That's so interesting. Okay. I didn't make that connection. So that's great that we brought that up. And then, so the transition from being a founder to an investor, what was that like?
It was great. I think a lot of founders, after they've done a few companies, feel like they want to stop being serial and want to be more parallel. And a number of founders try to do things like incubators and some very few, I think, are able to kind of pull off founding multiple companies at the same time. But being an investor is another way to sort of get your hands in a lot of different pies, be kind of exposed to a bunch of different startups. And it's a different lifestyle. I mean, we work very hard, but it's nothing like being a founder. It's not nearly as emotionally draining as running a startup.
Well, that's the one thing I think that, we kind of talk about, which is that it can be a little lonely and stressful. And we kind of advocate that people try to work together in some way, or at least have communities. So it's interesting you say that. So you find the VC or the investor side the less stressful?
It's one step removed, and I wouldn't call it a low stress job. I just think startup founder is one of the most high stress jobs.
For sure, because there's an emotional connection there, right? Like you're usually starting something that you feel passionately about.
Yeah, and you have commitments to your investors and your employees and your customers and your partners. And we have investors who we're committed to, and the founders that agree to work with us, we're committed to them, but it's somehow not quite as heavy a load as it was to be a founder.
Okay, so then when you're looking at companies that you want to invest in, what are 1 or 2 things that are really important to you?
Well, one of the things is the ability to withstand what we just talked about, which is the ability to be kind of resilient, the founders need to be resilient. It's good to be an optimist, just because it's really hard if you're a pessimist to come back after you've had 20 no's on a fundraising or something like that. We look for people who have endurance also, because it's often a longer game than one expects. When you start a company, you might be in it for 10 years or longer. And then we look for something that's special, right? And that something is hopefully the team, and actually we will only work with a team that we think is special, but also an insight. So very often, because one of the things that we like is bringing new technology to old industries.
Okay.
One of the things that we look for sometimes is a team, and the team often is somebody who's had experience in the industry with lots of firsthand knowledge of the pain points and the things that need to be upgraded, and a great technologist. Sometimes they're the same person, but very often they're different people. So an example, we have a company called Flock Freight, which is works with less than truckload shipping, which we could go into, but you know what it means.
Yeah.
And the guy who is the CEO, Oren Slansky, had a 3PL. He was in this business of interacting with freight for more than a decade before he started Flock Freight, which then brought in a CTO from Caltech, who worked on helping them solve a problem which is algorithmic, which is how to get loads bundled into trucks, kind of like Uber Pool for shipping, and going in the same direction.
And it's interesting, because that's always traditionally been a business where it's very a little bit of chaos, right? Where there's like a person that's trying to fill a truck, as opposed to using math or like a model.
Yeah. Well, very often also in less than truckload shipping, if we want to go down that hole, is a hub and spoke model. So you have a pallet of whatever going to a distribution center, where it gets loaded into a big truck and it goes to another hub, and so on. That introduces a lot of expense, a lot of CapEx, some really lots of opportunities for things to get broken as they're unloaded and offloaded or lost. So the ability to pack a truck with loads ABC and then unload them on your way, CBA, is really tremendously valuable in a bunch of ways.
Well, maybe that's a good segue to what sort of industries are you interested in? Do you typically invest in?
Yeah, so logistics is one where we've done a lot. And it's, like I said, it's bringing new technology to existing big industries that touch us every day that we don't necessarily think about. So logistics is certainly one of those. And, there's so much to optimize there, and it's good economically. It's also good environmentally, if you can reduce the time that trucks are on the road. We have quite a bit in logistics. We have some in health tech and med tech.
Okay.
Another big area with lots and lots of inefficiencies, 18% of the GDP, and plenty of opportunity. We have done stuff in property tech. We have an investment in forestry. So it's pretty much across the board.
So what's maybe one company that you're really excited about, or one technology area or industry?
Yeah, so one of the things, that a technology area that's very interesting to me is computer vision. And computer vision is one of the parts of AI, the larger umbrella, that's really kind of delivering on its promise and also very applicable today. So we have computer vision I mentioned forestry. That company called TreeSwift is able to fly drones under the canopy of a stand of trees, and using computer vision, measure the size of the trees. So if you're a timber company like Weyerhaeuser, which is one of their customers, you can use these drones to actually measure the timber quantity in a certain stand of trees. If you're interested in carbon sequestration, you could also look at the load from a different angle and say how much carbon is stored in this acre of land. So that's a great application of computer vision and some robotics with the drones. We have a company called NavTrack, which uses computer vision to help trucking yards manage their flows of traffic. So counting the trucks as they go in, identifying which container went in, which tractor, which frame, and helping them keep track of what's where. That's another application. We have quite a few of those.
That's really interesting. And I mean, when you say that, it feels like I was actually surprised that computer vision would be a hot area. So you're seeing, it sounds like real world application that, and they're getting customers for these things.
Oh, plenty, yeah.
Wow, that's
Because
really
computer vision is really, it's like I said, it's kind of delivering on its promise. I mean, I think
yeah.
when we talk about AI, often we're thinking about this sort of humanoid, a computer that's acting like a human. Well, computer vision isn't necessarily that, although it's very important if you want to have an autonomous car, for example. It's
Right.
but what a computer can do that a human could never do is look at a million images of something, right? A million X-rays or a million trees, and uh, and evaluate like large quantities of information. And so, for many of these applications, just having that ability is a game changer.
Yeah, that sounds very fascinating. So we'll have to take a look at that.
Yeah.
All right, if you could offer, you're a 3-time founder and have had exits and success, and now you're an investor. If you could tell founders, give them one piece of advice, what's the most important thing that you think you would share with them?
Just one. That's hard.
I know it's tough, but
And
you
I
can
don't
put
really.
two. How about two?
I could do.
Bonus.
I mean, your team is everything, right? A startup is
Yeah.
nothing but a collection of people, and so that's easy to say and hard to do. Like really focusing on management, like and management's one of those things that a lot of people kind of expect to grow into, but don't necessarily bother to learn a lot about. It's just sort of like, oh, you've been here for a long time, so you're going to become a manager. No, it's like learn how to manage people, learn how to get people to achieve their goals and really get the most out of them. They'll be fulfilled and you'll be satisfied with the work that you get. I think that's and that goes into culture and just how you run things, but that's I think the most important thing.
So are you typically getting involved, and maybe you kind of said this, like you're basically seed stage when they have an idea, or at what point would you talk to them?
We're seed stage, yeah. So usually it's past just having an idea. Sometimes we'll do that. And if we know the person or we know the space pretty well, we can go in that early. More often, the founder has something. They have a product, they have some customers or some customer interests, and sometimes even tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of revenue.
And so at what point, because often you see people that are good at certain things. So sometimes you'll find engineering type founders, other times it's more like a business or a marketing person. When you say that they should get good at managing, is there a certain point in time, or is that something you think right away they should start thinking about and working on?
Well, the day that you get your first employee, you're managing, right? So it's pretty early on, it's already an issue. And I think what's really important is, like, so let's say you have 5 employees, your first 5 employees. Maybe you don't have to have a lot of bureaucracy to manage them because you don't need a lot of bureaucracy to manage 5 people.
True.
But those 5 people are going to each hire 5 people eventually, and those are kind of the those key employees are going to end up influencing everybody who works for them, and and so on. And so setting up good practices and being like really empowering people well, even that early, is essential, and will kind of roll through the organization as it grows.
And that makes sense too, especially if someone's taking investment. That's probably what they're investing is people more than anything. Like
Headcount's almost always in for us, because we don't do a lot of like hardware or capital intensive stuff. Headcount is always the biggest expense by a lot.
That makes total sense then. What role have you seen that either allies and alliances or community has played in the success of the companies you've been investing in?
I think a lot of founders, as you pointed out earlier in this conversation, it can be very lonely. And so a common ask I get from founders in our portfolio is, please introduce me to someone who's just ahead of where I am, who maybe last year or 2 years ago was sitting in my stage of growth. And let me talk to that person. And having someone who's not me, because I'm an investor, I talk to people all the time and work through issues, but I do have another relationship with the founder in addition to being a coach. But finding someone who's got no skin in the game, who can just be a friend of the founder, who can talk them through some issues and comes from a place of a real empathetic experience, I think is very valuable. And that can be in the form of a one-on-one. It could be potentially a forum or a get-together. But I think that's something that we've seen founders really want, and I think it helps them a lot.
Oh, that's great to hear. Well, and that's part of our mission, as I mentioned. So it's like to, the first thing is provide a venue where founders can meet other founders and collaborate, or just have people that they trust that can offer advice. So that's great to hear that that's so valuable and important. All right. Well, I want to be conscious of your time. Is there anything that we haven't touched on that you think is important, first of all?
Sure. If we had an hour, we could probably talk for an hour.
Oh, we could take an hour if you want, but
nah, it's Friday afternoon.
People stop watching.
I think these are tough times, right? I don't know when this is going to be released to your audience, but it's a really tough time right now. So all those, like, it's important to focus on self-care. It's important to focus on caring for your team. Unfortunately, it's a time when a lot of people have to make their team smaller and expenses smaller in general. And so I think the people who stay really take note of how you treat the people who are leaving. This is a time to put on your empathy hat and take care of yourself as well as a founder.
That might be really good advice, because I imagine when this comes out, we'll be probably a week into what people will say is a recession.
I don't know.
We're anticipating it already, and they're already reacting and maybe overreacting. So it's gonna be interesting to see what happens.
I hope that advice is completely useless, because everybody's swimming in customer money.
I totally understand what you're saying. I think we're all kind of like, we have too much pre-information though. Sometimes people are already like leaking it like weeks ahead. It's like, this is gonna happen. Everyone wants to be a prognosticator or a prophet. So.
Well, I don't know exactly what's going to happen with the economy, but having been through a couple of these pullbacks in my career, they can hurt. They can be a bit painful. Yeah.
All right, we'll wrap with a couple quick things. What advice would you give to people that are looking to either talk to you or pitch their venture?
You can write me directly. I'll give you my email. It's david@10one10.net.
Oh, super. Okay.
So spelled out TENONETEN.net. And I don't always respond to everything because we get a lot of email, but I look at everything. That's the best way to get to me.
Well, we'll include your contacts in the show notes, so make it easy for people to get in touch with you. I also want to invite you. We do have various pitch events where we provide a venue for people that have an idea or maybe a product and their early customers. And sometimes we actually did our first demo day this year. So I think we've run 6 pitch events, and we have a 7th coming up in August. But I would like to invite you to a future event to maybe be a judge if you're interested in that.
Let's tell me the details so we can work it out.
Yeah, one of the events, just so you know, we've been doing is called Winner Takes All, and the founders stake $100 on themselves, and then the winner takes the pot. So it's kind of like playing poker on their pitch. So it can be kind of fun. So hopefully we can find a good venue for you to join us. That would be great.
Terrific.
All right. So the final thing is, when we have interesting people on the Founders Pack podcast, we like you to nominate other interesting people. As you know, we typically talk to either founders or investors in scalable ventures. Who would you, David, like to nominate as a future guest of the podcast?
Can I get back to you on that?
You can. Yeah.
All right.
Does anybody come to mind?
Maybe, but not while you're still recording.
Okay, no worries. Don't worry about it. All right. We will look for, I'm sure you have so many really interesting people. David, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time, and I appreciate your insight into so many things.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much.